guardian of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas by guaranteeing accessibility, fairness, efficiency, and transparency, delivering clear and just decisions in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, I wish to ponder on a few of these words. Guaranteeing accessibility. Mr. Speaker, the CCJ has demonstrated time and time again that it is a court that is fully accessible to every citizen, everyone, not just, Mr. Speaker, those that have deep pockets, but also, Mr. Speaker, those that have no pockets at all. Mr. Speaker, issue of fairness, efficiency, and transparency. These hallmarks, Mr. Speaker, came to light in numerous decisions emanating from the CCJ. And from all indications, Mr. Speaker, the CCJ is living up to its mission statement. The vision, Mr. Speaker, of the CCJ is to be a leader in providing high-quality justice, responsive to the challenges of our diverse communities, innovative, fostering jurisprudence that is reflective of our own history, values and traditions, and consistent, of course, with international legal norms. It's inspirational and, of course, worthy of the trust and confidence of the people of the region. Mr. Speaker, I wish to ponder upon the fact that one of the vision of the CCJ is to ensure and to be responsive to the challenges of our diverse communities. Mr. Speaker, there are many issues that the Constitution of Grenada does not provide for or does not address. When those issues arise, Mr. Speaker, it would mean one thing, that the court adjudicating on some of these issues would either, one, use its inherent jurisdiction and, of course, its discretion. Mr. Speaker, here we have the CCJ as its mission saying to us that one of its mission or its vision is to ensure and to take into consideration challenges of diverse communities and, of course, fostering a jurisprudence that is reflective of our own history, values, and traditions. May I add here, Mr. Speaker, that same cannot be said for the Privy Council. Mr. Speaker, judgments emanating from the Caribbean Court of Justice, the scales of fees and the rules of court, with provisions for poor persons to access the CCJ without fees and security for cost, have provided accessibility to timely justice. Mr. Speaker, in looking at and examining some of the judgments emanating from the CCJ, it is fair to say that fairness is at the heart of its judgments. The original jurisdiction of the court, the CCJ, Mr. Speaker, have put flesh on the bones of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. Individuals or companies and even state can use the treaty to make their own state as well as other CARICOM states comply with the treaty. Mr. Speaker, it was on 14th February 2001, most heads of CARICOM, including Grenada, signed an agreement establishing the CCJ. As a consequence, Mr. Speaker, Grenada has a legal obligation to the region to honor this agreement. Mr. Speaker, if countries were allowed to attend this heads of government meeting and sign on to agreements and nothing more, then, Mr. Speaker, the region would not be a strong and cohesive entity we all want it to be. By acceding, Mr. Speaker, to the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction, Grenada would essentially be honoring its obligation and thereby contributing to building a stronger regional entity. Mr. Speaker, I have heard many concerns being expressed about the court, the CCJ. And one of the concerns Mr. Speaker expressed is that judges of the court would be paid by governments, which of course can exert decisive informal pressure on them to deliver judgments favorable to that government. Mr. Speaker, the CCJ had preempted this issue. And in order, Mr. Speaker, the Caribbean Court of Justice is funded in perpetuity. A trust fund, Mr. Speaker, of $100 million has been established so as to enable the expenditure of the court to be financed by income from that fund. In this way, Mr. Speaker, the expenditure of the court, including remuneration of judges, is not dependent on the disposition of governments. As a consequence, Mr. Speaker, the CCJ is the only integration court of its kind that is financially independent of government and free from administrative control. The Caribbean Court of Justice Fund is administrated by a board of trustees drawn from regional entities. Mr. Speaker, the fact is, Grenada has already paid for use of the CCJ. We are paying for something which we are not fully utilizing. In other words, Grenada does not have to spend one black cent, Mr. Speaker, to utilize the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ, because we have already contributed, Mr. Speaker, to this fund. Mr. Speaker, this is good news. It is good news, Mr. Speaker, for our local court system. And Mr. Speaker, speaking about our local court system, let me be the first to admit, as the Minister of Legal Affairs, that our system is fraught with challenges, dire challenges. It is no secret, Mr. Speaker, that our court needs attention, not just in respect of the physical plant, but also the due administration of justice. Mr. Speaker, we're having delays in hearing matters, delays in delivering judgments. Hundreds of cases are lodged at the registry just waiting to be heard. Mr. Speaker, these are serious concerns. And as we've all heard before, justice delayed is justice denied. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we are quite cognizant of the challenges that we are faced. However, Mr. Speaker, I say in the same breath that the challenges that we have been facing and are facing with respect to our local system is not a justifiable reason, Mr. Speaker, to say to the government of Grenada that we should not, at this time, accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the court. Mr. Speaker, as we may all recall, Hurricane Ivan destroyed our court facility in 2004. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, today I believe makes it 15 years, 14 years since Hurricane Ivan would have struck. Our physical plant, Mr. Speaker, was destroyed beyond repair. The court then, Mr. Speaker, was moved to the old lime building on the Carnage. And very recently, Mr. Speaker, the court had to be relocated to many different areas. Of course, because of the quality of the air in the building, Mr. Speaker, and alleged issue of radiation. Mr. Speaker, being the type of government that we are, and being cognizant of the fact that staff, lawyers, judges, and everyone who used that facility got sick, government took the decision to clear and to move out persons from that building. As a result, Mr. Speaker, court were held in various locations, including the Trade Center and the Kaipo building. Presently, Mr. Speaker, the original court number 1 is under renovation and repairs, which, Mr. Speaker, will be available for use for the opening of the new law term in 2 weeks' time. Mr. Speaker, we've also presently in negotiations with CLICO, for the CLICO building on Yonge Street, Mr. Speaker, to have that building be used as a medium-term solution to house the court facility and the registry. Mr. Speaker, of course, the ideal thing would be to have our own court, our own halls of justice. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very confident that not too long from now, that we will see the commencement of work on this new facility. Mr. Speaker, the CCJ has demonstrated to us how matters are to be dealt and how matters should be dealt with. We have seen its swift nature. We have seen how it administers justice, Mr. Speaker. And we, signing on to the CCJ, would only be able to take a page and to learn from how they conduct their business at that higher end. Mr. Speaker, as a true Caribbean woman, as a native of Grenada, Carriacou and Petite Martinique, I'm indeed honored to be able to contribute and to be a part of this bill, which, Mr. Speaker, seeks to break the chain of colonialism. I know, Mr. Speaker, that this would not be the end, and that we have many more strides to make. But, Mr. Speaker, as others have said before me, I believe that this is the right time. And we all, as conscientious, patriotic men and women of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique should unreservedly support and, of course, vote overwhelmingly on the 6th of November to ensure that the Section 104 of the Constitution is actually amended to include, Mr. Speaker, the CCJ as the final appellate court instead of Her Majesty's Privy Council. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative for the Tongue of St. George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first commend again the government for bringing this bill before this House, a bill that I believe is as important as any other that we've brought here. I want to start by saying, Mr. Speaker, that some things rise above politics. There are some things in our society, some things that we do, that must rise above partisan, tribal politics. This bill is one such thing. This bill rises above any partisan arguments, any partisan and tribal rumblings in our society. It is a bill that will benefit everyone, regardless of political position. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by commending those in the opposition party who have come forward to indicate support for this bill. I want to commend the bravery that it takes, and I want to commend the fact that they have looked at it and decided that despite their opposition to the government, they will do what we've always said is the right thing, but support Grenada. And I want to say to them that when the history is written, when generations to come write about this portion of our history, it will become clear that they will have stood on the right side of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Mr. President, I have no doubt in my mind that all of Grenada will be looking at this bill to see where it benefits them. And I agree with the speakers who before said that the average man in this country must determine why it is he or she should support this bill. First of all, and I just want to reiterate a couple of things, I won't be long, Mr. Speaker, the accessibility. I think we've heard a lot about accessibility, and that is the most important element in a justice system. Because while we talk and some people speak about we must keep the Privy Council, none among them can say to me they have ever accessed the Privy Council. It's a right that they want that they cannot exercise. On the other hand, the CCJ is immediately accessible. And I don't need to go into all the reasons, such as the fact that it's closed, the fact that they are itinerant, they move around, the fact that the video facilities are available. I do not need to go back into all of that, just to say that to that Rasta man that my friend from St. Patrick's West spoke about, or to the police officer who had this case, I say to them, a good reason, as a member of South East St. Andrews said, the good reason is, first of all, accessibility to the highest levels of justice in our country. The fact is also, Mr. Speaker, that there are those who talk about competence. Whether or not, and you know, it reflects our view of ourselves sometimes, that sometimes a part of our colonial legacy is our lack of confidence in ourselves. Our ideas of beauty, our ideas of all kinds of things are shaped and formed by our colonial masters. So when we start questioning ourselves and say, boy, I don't believe we can do this, what we are doing is saying that we are lesser mortals than our colonial masters. And the truth is, in order to enslave our people on the African continent, the first thing that the Europeans had to do was to make them believe that they are lesser mortals than their colonial masters. So to those who would say we are not as competent, I say to them, look in the mirror. You are as competent as anyone else. But I want to refer to a statement made by Chief Justice Byron, the former president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ. He said, and he studied, he was the president of CCJ, he studied at Cambridge in England among all of the persons who went on to Privy Council and other higher courts. He said, I knew, and he's speaking now about his presence at Cambridge, I knew there was no issue of competence. After all, I was at Cambridge University with elite of the British student population of that generation and competed with them favorably academically on the sports fields, in the debating and the social skills. So it is a matter of great distress Sir Byron is saying, it is a matter of great distress, that in these times, more than half a century after he studied at Cambridge with the best of British society, that he says he has to persuade Caribbean people that they should abolish appeals to the Privy Council and adopt the CCJ as the final court of appeal. He's saying, in other words, that he was at Cambridge with all of the other persons who became judges of the Privy Council, etc. And he's distressed because half a century after going to Cambridge and being with those students, he has now to convince people of the adequacy of our judges to be in charge of the highest courts in our land. So the issue of competence that some people refer to, in my view, does not reflect the reality on the ground. It is simply a reflection of their own view of themselves. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is this issue of which court will better suit the Caribbean. No. My friend from St. Patrick's West also made this point. The CCJ will be a Caribbean court, reflective of Caribbean culture, Caribbean values, and everything Caribbean. I ask this question. Which court do you think will adequately reflect the views of Caribbean people to those who worry? Will it be the Privy Council, persons in Britain, persons who have never lived in the Caribbean, persons who don't share our values, persons who don't understand what we stand for and what values we uphold? Or would it be our people who have grown among us, who live among us, who attend the churches we attend, who attend the schools we attend, who are members of the soccer teams that we are members of? Who best do you think will reflect us? No doubt. No doubt in my mind that the CCJ will be the court that will take into account when it rules on matters facing it, all of the values that we have. Because the CCJ judges attend the same schools, churches, and institutions that we attend. So I say to those again, who would prefer to rely on the Privy Council, beware what you rely on. It is best we rely on people who share the values, share the culture, share everything that we have. I think, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that is why the Rasta man, my friend from St. Patrick's West, that is why the young man who was in an accident will no doubt benefit from judgment from people who understands his culture, who understands the Rastafarian movement more than Caribbean judges. So my friend from St. Patrick's West, when the Rastaman raises that question, say to him, he will get better justice from people who understands him. And that is why the CCJ is where we should go. With respect to why other Caribbean countries haven't done it well, Antigua is going to have their referendum on November the 4th, so they are moving in that direction. St. Vincent tried it in a referendum some years ago. The referendum failed for other reasons other than people's views on the CCJ. Why Trinidad hasn't gone? Well, I'm not sure why Trinidad hasn't gone, but not everything Trinidad does, we do, and not everything we do, they do. So I don't know why Trinidad hasn't done it. That is a matter for them. But what I would say is this, that we have a legal obligation also. I think it was raised by the Minister of Legal Affairs. We signed the treaty, the revised Treaty of Chatham. We agreed in February 2001 that we are going to join the CCJ, and I believe we have to also fulfill that obligation. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that we have to ensure that our judicial system works properly. And I want to quote Sir Justice Byron again when he says, the judicial system is one of the key factors considered in foreign direct investment. Investors want the assurance fostered by the existence of an independent and efficient judiciary that is promptly accessible to even those not too wealthy litigants to settle commercial disputes. The point he's making here is this, and I've always argued, Mr. Speaker, that we have to treat the judicial system as importantly as we treat other pillars of our economy. Because for there to be confidence, for the businessman and the investor, either large, small, or in between, they must be assured that we have a judicial system that is accessible readily to them, even if they don't have the enormous amounts of money that it costs to go to the Privy Council. The point I'm making here is this, that apart from accessibility for the average Grenadian, apart from the fact of our cultural similarities and the fact that the CCJ will reflect who we are as a people, the issue of development. That in order to have development, we must have a properly organized judicial system. My friend, the Minister of Legal Affairs, member for Cairo and Pitty indicated earlier that much is being done by the government to ensure that there is a faster process of access and delivery of justice, that we are working hard to develop a halls of justice sometime in the future, but at this time we are trying to prepare the court system, the registry, so that we have a better organized court system. Everybody knows that we have, in order to amount of delays, not only a problem in Grenada and some other islands throughout the world. I've practiced law in New York. You have these issues all the time, but we are trying to correct it in Grenada. But what we also have to do to have our investors confident that they can access justice is to have speed. We saw the case in St. Kitts in Barbados, where justice was delivered and the court sat even on a Sunday in order for justice to be delivered. I disagree with my friend from St. Patrick's West who spoke about quick justice in St. Kitts. That case didn't go quickly. In fact, they were delaying a lot of the elections and all because it took time. The Privy Council takes time. The Privy Council in some cases takes years before you get there. In the case of the CCJ, I have no doubt it will be faster. So, in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, I want to say I've spoken enough. I think everybody here has spoken sufficiently about that. I want to say that I believe that all of Grenada will come to understand the benefit of CCJ. I believe from the Rasta man in the north to the fisherman in the south, that they will understand that the CCJ represents them. I believe that Eric Matthew Gary will roll in his grave if we do not get this, because it will be the fulfillment of the dream of independence to finally get this CCJ. You cannot claim to be an independent country if your justice is not delivered by your people. If your Caribbean people are not the ones delivering justice. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this. I believe Grenada supports this. And again, I want to end by commending those who may not support this government, who may not support the party that supports this government, but who understand that CCJ is about Grenada, who understand that there are times when we have to set aside the tribal political instincts and move as one people, that Grenadians will find it much more responsible sometimes when you look at the national good rather than the individual tribal good. And for that, I want to commend, from my heart, really commend those who have decided to come on board to promote CCJ so we can ultimately deliver the best justice we can for the people of this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Parliamentary Representative for the tongue of St. George. Honorable Representative for St. George Northeast?
No, huh? Northwest.
Northwest, sorry. Why I keep mixing up the two. Northwest.
Mr. Speaker, I think we've had a long morning and part of the day already. So I won't keep you long, except to make a few points and, of course, to go on record formally at the Parliament session, this very special session, in giving my full support to the country moving towards accepting the CCJ as its final appellate court. Mr. Speaker, I also want to go on record to say this. I'm not a person who has just come on board to support an institution. A long time ago, I stood in support. At every forum I had the chance to support this important initiative. And to say this, I think most Caribbean people and leaders want to support this and have, in fact, on most occasions, came out in support. Unfortunately for us, our politics has become so partisan in the region in general, not just in Grenada, that a party in government today says it's in full support of the CCJ. It is voted out of office, and then the same party comes out saying that it's opposed to the CCJ. I don't know how you could be supporting an important issue like this on one side of the parliament area, and then as soon as you move to the other section of the parliament in opposition, then you become to oppose. That is what's happening in Trinidad today. The Trinidad government at the time was full in support, and that's why when we gave our endorsement to Trinidad being the headquarters of the CCJ, the Trinidad government then was in full support, but went into opposition, and then it became, and it decided to oppose the CCJ. And that has been the case consistently in many parts of the region, and that's the reason, to remember St. Patrick West, that's one of the reasons that you don't have enough more countries in support of the CCJ's partisan political activity responsible for this. But our party in government has been supporting this before. In opposition, we have been supporting this before. And for when we're in government again, we're in support of it. To me, this is beyond partisan political interests. And that's why I believe the record must show that this party in government stands on principle and fundamental issues. And I have no doubt in my mind that if anyone thinks of the country first and thinks of the future of this country and the children or future generations, one will not place the political interests. I could at least have understood the last time when this issue went to referendum, because it was so close to a general election, some persons went into opposition to this for partisan political interest, while it was not the right thing to do. But there is no impending general elections now. In fact, we just had a general elections. And therefore, I would have expected our present official opposition, or the major political party in opposition, would come out in strong support. But I just want to say that I received a copy of a letter written by what is termed to be the interim leader of the National Democratic Congress, sent to the chairman of the advisory committee yesterday. And I was appalled by it. I couldn't understand it. In effect saying, we don't have a problem supporting, but we need several changes to the electoral laws of the country. Several things which to me should not be, even if it was the right thing to do, it should not interfere with the decision to support the CCJ. But it seems that what is being said is that for us to support all these electoral changes must be made. People must not be allowed to come to vote without an ID in Grenada. And does not make any sense. I hope and pray that better sense will prevail among the major members of the opposition party. And I hope this is just an initial position taken, and I think it's important for our advisory committee and those who are interested to counsel our brothers and sisters in the opposition that they should come forward and take a very serious interest in this exercise. Because I'm convinced, Mr. Speaker, individual members of us, we may do what we wish. But I'm convinced that the majority of people will come out and support this important initiative. I have been to a couple public sessions already, and I was surprised the level of interest, especially after that presentation some Wednesdays ago by many persons who addressed the gathering at the Trade Center. There appeared to be, in the public view, a good feeling of support for this initiative. And I think it's incumbent upon those of us who believe it to spread the message and to take that principled position. And I believe if we do this, devoid of the partisan politics, do not get into attacking members of the opposition or members of the government, but take a position on the basic fundamental principles facing us. Because this is what this is all about, Mr. Speaker. The record will show, years from now, some of us would not be around, and then in Parliament, and maybe not be around on this earth. But the record will show that we took a strong, positive stand for what is right for the people. There's nothing in this bill for any partisan political party. Nothing. There's only one thing in this. It's for the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and for the Caribbean region as a whole. Mr. Speaker, it must concern me also that in the case of the Privy Council, the Privy Council members are all appointed by the political organization in England. So, no independent body chooses the Privy Council in England. They're chosen by the political establishment in England. There's no such thing in the Caribbean. I have been Prime Minister for many, many years. I've never been asked one question about a judge. Nobody has asked me. Nobody even reported who has been. The only time have to have anything to do with CCJ when it is said that most team members are recommending, the independent commission is recommending a certain individual to be the new president of the CCJ. That's the only time I've been told, because every country has to give a vote. And that by the time we get there, it's already been decided. And the only thing you can be is it will be obstructionist and say no, which would be, of course, extremely foolish and backward. So we have no say, and I'm happy with this. And I like to always quote Prime Minister Barrow, Dean Barrow from Belize, when the new CCJ president was being installed in Jamaica recently. He said his country has had several cases that have gone before the CCJ. They have lost several of those cases. He said, I didn't agree with the CCJ, but that is no reason for me to oppose the CCJ, because I cannot expect that I could only support the CCJ because I get result in my favor. The CCJ is about justice. It is not about justice for those in power, and therefore the government has to accept the results of the decision of the court. And Dean Barrow is the Prime Minister responsible for justice in the region. And yet the CCJ was ruling against his government on many occasions to his own disagreement, but accepting of that responsibility that the CCJ must make its own decision. That, to me, is a matter of principle. Unlike what we saw in Barbados recently, You didn't get the results in your favor, I am going to withdraw from the CCJ. How can we move forward on that basis? The CCJ is not supposed to give decision to a government. It's supposed to give decision to the people and based on what is right and just. And I'm Mr. Speaker, I am convinced, I am very convinced, this bill will pass. If all of us do what we have to do as leaders and take the position that I've heard many of us have done here today, I believe it will certainly pass. And I want to compliment the many presentations that I've heard today, but several members of this House, and in particular the presentation of the member for St. Patrick West. Not everything he said that I agree with, but certainly I believe that he made a very strong presentation and ended up in a very strong note on the rationale for the support of the CCJ. Therefore, I give my full support. And I expect us to do all that we can on the ground in our various constituencies, among our family and friends in the country, urging them, because I believe the people who go out to vote will not go out generally and say, I go in and vote no. I believe they will vote yes. I look forward to that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. George Northwest. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, as I stand to wind up the debate on this very important bill, I wish to commend all those who have supported it, and I don't want to preempt your comment, Mr. Speaker, but it is extremely clear from the presentation that the benefits emanating from the passage of this bill and later by the passage of the referendum will be significant for our people. Mr. Speaker, in presenting the bill, I stayed away because I know that many speakers will speak after me from the goods, and they have definitely brought out the benefits of this. But they have also indicated, Mr. Speaker, in their contributions that education is critical and the key. And so we must look to where certain persons in our society may still have difficulty in saying, well, I don't understand. I remember the last occasions, many bills, each bill having 100+ clauses. I wish to indicate, Mr. Speaker, that the bill before us today has only 31 clauses. And of those 31 clauses, Mr. Speaker, clause 17 to 31 deal with nomenclature in the existing code that we have now. Like we know, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and the West Indies Associated Court, it's all there now. So what these 17 to 31 will be doing is really to clean in it and say it means the same thing as it does now, the OECS Appeals Court, as we refer to it. So we see West Indies Associated Court. That's when we had the same dollar with Barbados, West Indies Associated system, when all of us were colonies. But as we move forward, Mr. Speaker, we have changed. But with respect to the court system has not changed up to the Associated Supreme Court now, or what we refer to our Court of Appeal. So clauses 17 to 31 deal with these things. The substantive amendment to the Constitution is dealt with from clauses 1 to 13. In those clauses we say, we propose that the Caribbean Court of Justice will be the final court of appeal. So you go to the Magistrate Court, the High Court, the OECS Court of Appeal. That remains the same. It has been touched. It's what we're moving across to the Privy Council, to the CCJ. That's what clauses 1 to 13 deal with, the substantive motion. So those in between, Mr. Speaker, 14, 15, and 16, what do they deal with, Mr. Speaker? And they are important. Clause 14 talks to the finality of matter. Say nothing contained in this act shall be construed as conferring jurisdiction on the Caribbean Court of Justice to hear and determine matters in relation to any decision of the Court of Appeal which at the date of commencement of this act pursuant to the Constitution or any other law was declared to be final. There are certain laws that will indicate that the furthest that you can go is the OECS Appeals Court. So that is final. You cannot now go to say, well, I want to take this matter that is already a finality and bring it to the Caribbean Court of Justice. All matters dealt with by Her Majesty's Privy Council, which we refer to as the Privy Council. It's a finality. No. You cannot say, oh, I'm waiting for the CCJ, so I'm going to go and take this matter already dealt with by the Privy Council and put it before the CCJ. No. This is what Clause 14 is dealing with, Mr. Speaker. It is not so much as substantively changing the Constitution, but it is telling you what you can and cannot do when the CCJ comes into effect. How would someone feel that you went out and you went into the Privy Council? We know of whatever shortcomings, it has well been elaborated here. But you cannot go to something that's already reached its final stage and try to bring it back. So it is important, while it is not dealing with the substantive amendment, Mr. Speaker. What does 15 say? 15 removes confusion. It says the provision of this act shall not affect any application that was made to Her Majesty in Council. So we've made an application to Her Majesty in Council. So what do you want to do? Come and just take it out, or kick it out and throw it and bring it to the Privy Council? It says, Mr. Speaker, any matter that was before Her Majesty in Council before the date of commencement of this act. So when this act commences, obviously, you cannot go anywhere to a Privy Council. You must go to the CCJ, Mr. Speaker. And it shall not affect the execution or enforcement of any decision given in respect of the application of matters referred to in paragraph A of this section after the commencement of this act. So, Mr. Speaker, it clarifies the situation. If you have matters before the Privy Council, so let it proceed. And if you have matters that's in a final nature, it will be enforced. So don't expect if you run before the CCJ and say, they ruled for me to pay $10 there, but I'm coming before you to take it out. No. All the court system, including our highest court, will work to enforce decisions already in the final stage, Mr. Speaker. 16 is transitional. An appeal pending before Her Majesty in Council at the date of commencement of this act may be transferred to the Caribbean Court of Justice with the consent of all parties. So the Privy Council must say, from what we're hearing, most likely they will say, quickly move it. They may keep it, but from what we know, and where they're complaining about the judges having to be consumed by the Privy Council, because remember, their final court of appeal is not the Privy Council. So they will have to say yes, the CCJ will have to say yes, the claimant and the defendant will have to say yes. So all parties must say yes before we remove matters pending, assuming this is passed, okay, from the Privy Council before the CCJ. So you do not have this migration, this mass migration, even against the will of the parties. This is of extreme importance. Otherwise, we could have chaos, Mr. Speaker. Proceedings shall be deemed to be pending when appeal to Her Majesty in Council, that's the Privy Council, has been instituted before the date or commencement of this act, again clear, even though it is inferred, you could only bring a matter if this act is in effect and passed and the Constitution amended, then you can't go back to the Privy Council. Leave to appeal or special leave to appeal to Her Majesty in Council has been granted or applied for before the commencement of this act. So if you applied and got permission to go to the Privy Council before the commencement of this act, even though it goes into effect, that means you can proceed to the Privy Council. And you can use the other clause which says all parties could then come together and say, let's go back to the Caribbean Court of Justice. It is less expensive, etc., etc. Although I understand by a learned member of the legal fraternity that you could have paid certain sums, but most likely you will not get it back. So maybe the decision to remain there may stay, Mr. Speaker. And it says, any judgment of Her Majesty in Council, which at the commencement of this act has been given, but not satisfied, may be enforced after the date of commencement of this act, if such judgment has been a judgment of the Caribbean Court of Justice. So whatever was legally done under the Constitution by the Privy Council, Her Majesty in Council, will be upheld by the CCJ. So there will be a continuum. And this is important, Mr. Speaker, for people to know that they would not be left in limbo. So some people may say, I'm not supporting the CCJ. I intend to bring a matter up to the Privy Council. So what will happen to that matter? The bill makes it abundantly clear. So now you can have peace of mind and say, I can support the CCJ because that is what I want. And there's no reason given to me for not doing so. So, Mr. Speaker, we must recall too why all these things are important. It's just one vote to cross you over the line. And some people may want to, or in their heart, support the CCJ. But because they were not too clear on this particular issue, they withheld that vote, or they voted against it, keeping us against all the benefits that have been so well articulated here today, Mr. Speaker. So I only mention a few. And I know that the steering committee and the legal fraternity and the bar will take on the responsibility of explaining many of those things, particularly 1 to 16. 17 you can explain in a block. But 1 to 13 and the transitional provisions should be taken up by the legal profession, by the steering committee. Because as we visit and we discuss with people, sometimes confusion lies in not knowing exactly what the clauses of the agreement or the amendments say, Mr. Speaker. I therefore commend this constitutional bill for a second reading, Mr. Speaker, and ask the public. It transcends the members of the parliament. It transcends the political party. It has all to do with our people. And we hope, Mr. Speaker, that this bill will see the light of day and will move, Mr. Speaker, to the referendum stage where we can call on our people, the different institutions and so forth, to ensure that this bill becomes a reality and our final court of justice will be the Caribbean Court of Justice. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Parliamentary Representative. Honorable members, the question is that this bill be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act.
Honorable.
Mr. Speaker, is at this stage, if I'm correct, that we call for a division, not in the fact of any animosity or anything, but just for the record to show that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 15, 16, 17, 18 members here, how many support the bill, Mr. Speaker?
Okay, we have 13 members present right now.
Of course, I say the assembly call for a division, not in any animosity, just for the records to show. Yes.
All right. Honorable parliamentary representatives, Dr. The Right Honorable Kit Mitchell, how do you vote? Yes. Honorable Clarence, Gregory Boyne, how do you vote?
Yes.
Honorable Peter David, how do you vote? Yes. Honorable Clarice Modest Cowan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Honorable Alvin Dabrio, well, he's not here now. Honorable Yolan Bid Hosford is not here either. Honorable Oliver Thomas Joseph.
Yes.
Honorable Kate Lewis.
Yes.
Honorable Pamela Moses.
Yes.
Honorable Emmeline Pierre.
Yes.
Honorable Kendra Mathurin Stewart.
Yes.
Honorable Nicholas Steele.
Yes.
Honorable Delma Thomas.
Yes.
Honorable Tobias Clement.
Yes.
Honorable Anthony Boson.
Yes.
All 13 members present voted yes. 0 no. Honorable members, so if you had come to a college. Those who are in, so honorable members, we have now completed the second reading of the bill. It's o'clock. 13. 2 absent. 13 2 yes. 2 absent. All right. Clock. Just you have to read it out. We do the second reading. Yeah, we finished the second reading. So we're going on the third reading now. We're going to committee. Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. George Southeast. Did you read out the
Yeah.
Put the question there. Honorable Parliamentary at St. George Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill part by part.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill part by part. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, the House is now in committee.
Part 2, substituting the Caribbean Court of Justice for Her Majesty in Council.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 2 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Part 3, repeal of the West Indies Associated States Appeal to Privy Council, Order 1967, and West Indies Associated States Appeal to Privy Council, Grenada, Order 1967.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 3 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Part 4, General Savings Transitional.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 4 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Part 5, styling the Supreme Court, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 5 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Part 6, styling the court's order, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court order.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 6 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Part 7, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court generally.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 7 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Part 1, preliminary.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 1 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Parliamentary Representative, Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've just been advised that the clerk did not make the pronouncement. I think while we were in that stage, we went into the secondary, the committee stage. After it was voted, then I think the clerk, no, we, in this particular bill, we just want to be so much correctly. So if we're positive that the normal pronouncement by the clerk when the bill is, it has been read a second time, it has been voted upon, so we're certain, but it's just the clerk indicating after.
That it was read the second time?
Yes, it's
the
normal
bill.
pronouncement after the bill is read a second time. I think while we were in that being checking and tallying the votes and so forth, we may just have omitted that, and we want to be so very correct procedurally with this bill. Yeah. So the procedure, I think you will tell me, Mr. Speaker, whether we recommit to that stage and simply go through the process again. That's
go through the process of the third. Okay, I
from
understand.
allowing him to read what he normally does after the second the second reading is passed, and then I don't know if you will say, well, we have already gone into the committee stage, or if you'll recommit and just redo it again. I think I'll leave that up to the Speaker.
All right, I understand, Honorable Leader of Government Business, because I did
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I think we'll just recommit to that point, and then the clerk will do what he has to do from then on.
Honorable members, in our counting of the votes and making sure and so on, we skipped just that very, very important part of it. That is the announcement by the clerk. That is after the second reading. So I would revert back and ask the clerk if we can take from that extra part, that part again, and then move down. So we will still do the parliament. So I'm going back into all right, clerk?
Okay. A bill for an act shortly entitled Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Code of Justice, and Renaming of Supreme Court Amendment Act 2018.
Yeah. Oh. Right, just stay right there. Right, okay, go on back. You'll have to come back in a hurry.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Code of Justice, and Renaming of the Supreme Court Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill part by part.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill part by part. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. All right, so honorable members, the House is in committee.
Part 2, substituting the Caribbean Code of Justice for Her Majesty in Council.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 2 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Part 3, repeal of West Indies Associated States Appeal to Privy Council, Order 1967, and West Indies Associated States Appeal to Privy Council, Grenada, Order 1967.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 3 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Part 4, general, savings, and transitional.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 4 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Part 5, styling the Supreme Court, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 5 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Part 6, styling the court order, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court order.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 6 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Part 7, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court generally.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 7 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Part 1, preliminary.
Honorable members, the question is that Part 1 preliminary forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
did I hear the last part was Part 7?
Yeah,
before we went to part 1?
yeah.
Part 8, maybe it's just an error. Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court generally.
That is part 7.
Is it?
There seem to be.
3 and 3 eyes.
It's part 8. If that's what it's part 8. So maybe it's just a correction again. That's a typo.
Yeah, according to. We have part
Mr.
6.
Chairman, it seems to be a typo on the clerk is
Yeah,
correct,
it
but
seems
our
to be a
documents
typo.
are
We
like
have
this.
part 6,
And then it went straight to
and
8.
then we went straight to part 8.
So the clerk
So
is
there was
correct,
no
it's a
part 7.
typo.
So we just have the typographical
It's a typographical.
graphical error. So could we consider this as a
I think that is acceptable.
Correction.
Minor correction, acceptable.
minor correction?
Minor correction.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we just have to be so
Yeah, I
very
agree.
careful
I
with
agree.
this constitutional bill. Yes.
Leader of government business. Yeah. Leader of government business. Honorable members, the question is that this honorable house resumes and the chairman of committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, the house resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed with one minor correction. Leader of government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, we would vote by what's the name? We voted already. All right. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. So, honorable members, we had 13 people, 13 present, 0 absent, 2 absent, no noes.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Code of Justice, and Renaming of Supreme Court Amendment Act 2018.
Item number 16, request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance.
Leader of government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the adjournment of this House sine die.
Honorable members, the question proposed is this honorable house stands adjourned. Honorable members, I looked over to see if there were any member who would wish to speak out the adjournment, but there seem to be no members. They said to me that you were satisfied with a hard day's work and you have accomplished much. And I want to commend all of the parliamentary representatives for their contribution at this beginning of a historic making. Because the passage of that bill at this stage, we pray that it would go through at all other stages and become our final appellate court. But I must commend the parliamentary representative for Carrico and Pity Martini. I had to look to make sure that that's not if she was perfect in her delivery. So we want to commend you, and we want to say to you that I hope the leader of government business might use you and work you a little harder. That's what happens. They say is no rest for the willing. People say no rest for the willing. Well, let me thank you all for what I consider a very pleasant day, a very good day. And ladies and gentlemen, the question is that this honorable house stands adjourned. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this house now stands adjourned. Sign it aye.
You had to make some definitive statements, and you, PS, had to outline the ministry's policy as it relates to how new uniforms or uniform change is gone about, because there's a situation that we are all aware of on social media and everywhere else about uniform change. What is the situation there? Are we remedying it, or that school end up with 2 uniforms? Suppose the parents have gone out and bought. What's happening?
I'll come in, but PS can start.
Why was there such a miscommunication?
All right, there's some background to it, so let me give you the background to the whole thing. The school would have made arrangements, if I can call it that, to change the school uniform, right? So they had all kind of consultations, did whatever, the PTA and so on and so forth. And they were going to change the school uniform. Now, it was brought to the attention of the Ministry of Education. That was sometime when CEO was Elvis Morin. And he would have contacted the principal and said to the principal that this is not the way that it has to be done. He pointed out the Education Act as the authority for what has to be done, what are the procedures, what are the protocols. That since it's a government school especially, any change that has to take place with any uniform or anything like that, it must first of all get the blessing of the Minister of Education, who would then communicate to the CEO, right? Now this was not done. So procedurally, they were in breach. And then the CEO went on to say that you should stop all efforts at this, right? He then sent out a circular. The circular was received, it was answered to, and the principal said she understood and that efforts would stop. Okay? Sometime later on, when I became PS, the CEO was out, The principal, she came to me, outlined that what and what is the case, and they need to. So I spoke to her of the same thing and the approval that, as she quoted from her, that the approval has to be had. And if you don't get approval, you can go ahead to thing. Well, indeed, and in fact, they wrote asking for approval, and the ministry returned. I would have written back, and I reaffirmed what the CEO would have said some months ago. Quoted the same sections the CEO would have said, quoted, and asked that they stop, that it can be approved because of the clear breaches in terms of procedure and so on. That should have been, well, it should have been the end of it a long time ago, but that should have been the end of it, right? Because clearly the approval was not given. And then lo and behold, we understand that the uniform, some children came with one and some came with the other. I contacted the principal, and her defense was that it is not her. It is the parents who have done it.
Oh, so yes. Where did the communication go wrong?
Right, it's the parents who have done it. And so it's a simple thing, Brenda, really. The principal is the head of the plant. She has sole responsibility, right? And so I asked her to uphold the rules of the school rules. If children do not come with the approved uniform, and she was good enough to say to me that some children came with one color, and some came with the school uniform.
Right.
So she knows what the school uniform is. So I said, and what did you do? And what do you do? You know, and you see, it drives home. There are a few things here. Now, the tail can't walk the dog.
No.
Let's get that straight. The tail can't walk the dog. Secondly, a PTA, a principal, whoever, has no authority to change the school uniform. There are clear procedures enshrined. That's what the Education Act is there for.
She's aware of it because
she's aware. Because she engaged, and that's the thing. She engaged, right? So this cannot happen. Now, let's say, for example, you have a PTA or parents who decide to change the school uniform. Now, when these parents are gone 6 years or 7 years, and new parents come into the school, they can decide, well, now we ain't like that, let's change. I mean, you see the confusion that we're having immediately. But what this also would do, Brenda, is to set a precedence. Because how then can we say to any other school who decides unilaterally that we want to change the uniform, what does the ministry say? Everything has already gone out the door. As a matter of fact, some just recently, in the recent past, Happy Hill wanted to rebrand. And part of that rebranding was changing the school name, changing the school uniform. They went ahead doing the thing in the same way that the principal in Carriacou would have done it. And when it came to the ministry, we stopped it. And they stopped. And this is what we expected, because we were clear in terms of our direction. And so at this point, I had a conversation with the principal, and I asked her to uphold the rules of the school. So I'm hoping that from today, that she would uphold the rules of the school, and they would come back with the uniform.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And coming from a school where things like discipline and respect and understanding, communication, and so on is supposed to emanate from, that's very interesting. Let's hope it works out.
Yes, I wanted.
I will just add, it has to work out.
That's very, 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 very interesting.
Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new national party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.